Please take your seats quickly, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Tennis Weekly with Joel, Kim and Chris. On today's Tour Catch-Up, sponsored by DownloadTennis.com.
Carlos Alcaraz finds his mojo in Madrid.
Swiatek and Sabalenka look good for another final showdown.
And Simona Halep speaks out on her doping case.
Chris, today is the 2nd of May and we are here to catch up on the week in tennis at Tennis Weekly HQ. It is the Madrid Open. We are at the quarterfinal stage. Well, actually, we're a little bit above the quarterfinal stage for the women. We've got a few of the quarterfinalists as well set for the men. Carlos Alcaraz seemingly is back to his best after a little blip in the first round against Rusevori. Swiatek and Sabalenka look like they have picking up where they left off in Stuttgart. And I'm not going to lie, Chris, I am loving the fact we potentially on the men's side might have two, not one, but two lucky losers in the quarterfinals. Daniel Altmaier from Germany is already there. Struff could also be there. I mean, it just shows, I feel, how open the Madrid Open actually is.
I mean, throw in a qualifier in the quarterfinals in the form of Karatsev. I mean... Could we get a repeat? I need to look at the draw to see this, but I do believe that Struff lost to Karatsev, so we could be having a repeat of the final round of qualifying as a match later in the tournament. So it's as open as it gets, Joel.
From your perspective, what does that mean for you in terms of seeing lucky losers get to quarterfinals of the main draw proper of a Masters 1000 event? Are you all for it in terms of, oh, that's a great story? Or does that suggest to you actually the Madrid Open... there's been some better years?
I mean, I did flag this last week. It was looking like there could be some gaping holes in the draw, but I think it's always nice when you see a player that maybe couldn't qualify for the main draw getting a decent paycheck, because I mean the top players are earning enough. So I think it answers that sort of question. And when it comes to finding places for these players to play, it's not always easy. So seeing some of the slightly lower ranked players doing well is great, but I don't think we need two lucky losers and a qualifier making it this far. That's too many stories for it to be a good story.
Too much.
It's a bit much.
It's too much, yes. Well, we're going to be discussing that in the first half. We're going to be looking at all the action from the men's draw and the women's draw. We're going to be discussing as well Simona Halep's doping case. She's spoken out about that this week. Wimbledon have also released their spring statement, and we're going to be reviewing our predictions. I'm not really looking forward to that, to be quite honest with you. We're going to be reviewing our predictions, getting into the business end of the Madrid Open. Sadly, Kim is not with us. She's on holiday at the moment in Belfast. So it's just me and Chris for the reins today. I mean, Chris, Madrid Open aside, what have you eyed up this week that has kind of taken your interest in the tennis world?
Well, you know, I'm the biggest fan of Serena Williams there is.
I didn't know that.
In case I haven't mentioned it on the podcast, but I do just think that even I am being tested here, that she had me fooled. She was playing with us because
yes, she was.
Only last week I think I was saying, are we eyeing up a return? There was a picture of her playing the tennis racket.
Hook, line, sinker.
I know. And it said, just trying to stay fit here, holding a tennis racket. That was clearly a Latergram. She's from the same Instagram school of thought as Kim.
Latergram from April 1st, I feel.
I mean, it could have been, because I felt like as silly as I did at April Fool's, but and then she posted that the three of them were invited to the Met Gala and debuts her baby bump on the steps of the Met. So have to say, absolutely thrilled for her, because I do think for a lot of people who are big fans of her, I know it's almost like you feel a bit guilty being like, I want to see her play again, when really I think we want what's best for her, and I think this probably is what's best for her. She's always wanted to start a family and have another child, and I think she had that great final push, a great final showing, and hopefully this is now a lovely path into kind of a second round of motherhood for her. So I think it's super nice news, but I do wish she didn't have to have the perfect sort of the perfect sort of trick for us all. You know, we all bought it, and I was almost booking a ticket to Eastbourne.
Yeah, I know. It was, I'm not going to lie, it did catch me by surprise when I saw the news come through. It came through here about kind of 1 a.m. when I was just about kind of going to sleep, and I was a bit surprised.
I thought she was having twins, Joel.
Yes.
When it said the three of us, because on the group we shared a picture of just Serena.
Yes.
Turns out the third person was her husband. We can confirm she's having one baby.
But I mean, the Met Gala, it did happen. Tennis stars were even.
Berrettini was
there.
there.
Berrettini, Roger Federer,
Guest
of
of
course.
Hugo Boss, I assume.
Exactly. So, it was great to see all the tennis stars kind of getting involved. I mean, for me personally, what I have enjoyed outside of the Madrid Open is today actually marks, to me, a very special day for a tennis event that happened not on the tour, but for me is perhaps one of, if not the greatest exhibition match that has ever happened. It was the Battle of the Surfaces, Roger Federer versus Rafael Nadal on this day in 2007, 16 years ago. This was, I mean, for any of our listeners who don't know, this was just a marketing campaign. We had one half of a court dressed as a grass court, one half of a court dressed as a clay court, and you had Nadal on a 72-match win streak on the clay, Federer on a 48-match win streak on the grass. And they did not hold back in this exhibition. It went to final set tiebreak. Rafa won 12-10 in that final set tiebreak. This, Chris, was just a fantastic match. I'm amazed it happened. Its legacy, I feel, has fully kind of come on in leaps and bounds since it happened. And I want to raise it because I'm thinking, if they did the Battle of the Surfaces again, of the current generation, who would you have facing off on a grass and a clay court, or would you even change up the surfaces?
That is a fantastic question. Well, I would have to say it's got to be a bit of Carlos on the clay, and then when it comes to Wimbledon, I guess maybe it's Carlos and Djokovic we've got going. That might be the people of the now. I think the generational aspect might be particularly interesting in that as well, because obviously with Federer being a little bit more mature than Nadal, but I can't believe, Joel, that was 16 years ago. That does make me feel particularly old, because I remember watching that and thinking that was epic. I also do remember that I think they probably had a deal that it was going to go to a final set tiebreak with the score being 7-5, 4-6, 7-6 to 12-10.
I think they had to change shoes at during the switchover because of the different surfaces.
They didn't change every 3 games, I don't think. I remember they didn't do that.
Okay.
I think maybe they did it by set potentially. I want to say it was very, very visually interesting, even if the tennis wasn't the highest
to bring it
quality
back.
from them both.
I want Battle of the Surfaces 2, and maybe I'd go over to the women's side and I'd have Iga Swiatek on the clay versus, it's got to be Alicia Parks on the indoor hard courts, Chris, obviously.
That's a great shout. The queen of the indoor hard courts.
Half roof open, half roof off. Yes, make it happen.
I mean, that's a match I pay to see.
I know, right. Before we get into the tennis and all the action that's happened so far, I mean, a big talk of the town, or talk of tennis fans at the moment, is the fact that it is a 2-week tournament. This is a new format. It's going to be the same format in Rome later on this month. How are you finding it from like a fan's perspective, given, we started, I think, last Wednesday proper in the main draw. We're coming up to sort of the midway point. How are you finding it in terms of your experience of this 2-week format?
It's all been a bit odd, hasn't it? I think we had first rounds being played before qualifiers had finished at the start of the tournament, and it feels like if you don't have the same sort of Grand Slam points and Grand Slam feel to it, that it doesn't really work across the 2 weeks. I think we're all used to Indian Wells and Miami being kind of the 1.5 week situation. Sometimes that's kind of in itself, it can also be a little bit on the slow side, especially back to back. And I think I understand what they're trying to do by emulating almost sort of that sunshine double on the clay. But it does feel like we aren't getting sort of that jam-packed schedule that is sometimes so enjoyable about this. And I went to Rome last year, and I think I'm so pleased that I did, because this year, 2 weeks, you would not get the same
It's a bit
level of
much.
action because, yeah, you're running around and you're trying to see all these matches, and it's just such an exciting event for fans because on those outside courts, you do have fantastic matches. So I do think when this happens, it is probably more of a financial decision for the tournament, which I understand, than it is for kind of a fan player experience perspective.
Yeah, because I think, the rationale was that, these big master level events are money earners. So naturally they want to extend those events to as long as possible. And I can see also from a player perspective, it doesn't feel too rushed. In theory, it might also, I think, be advantageous from tournament organisers for these top players to play both Madrid and Rome because they're not so kind of dense and compacted in together. But yeah, from the fan perspective, I've got to say, it just takes a bit too long to get going. And when you've got kind of the top players having a bye in the first round, it doesn't really feel like there's much going on, in those first opening rounds. And when you watch it on the TV, I don't think the spectators are really buying it into it either, given the number of empty seats, particularly I think in those opening days. So yeah, I'm not quite sure about it. And we did put a poll out on our social media to ask if it wasn't just us and whether our kind of community of followers was feeling it as well. And Chris, at the moment in the vote, 53% say no, they're not a fan of the 2-week format. But it's been interesting because there's been kind of definitely some kind of strong opinions from either side.
Yeah, I think I'm just pleased that finally Twitter polls agreed with us, Joel. Imagine if we just said our opinions and it came back 53% of people like it. But no, I think it's been interesting. We also asked the question and we got some really interesting responses. I think we had one from Mark G on Twitter who said that it's not quite there. The format takes a bit too long to get going and the first round buys need to be abolished. Totally understand where he's coming from. And then we also had kind of on the flip side of things, we had Michael Dickens on Twitter as well. He said that it's kind of nice from a pacing setting, so of the 2-week format, but there seems to be kind of more opportunities for storylines to be created and explored. So obviously we've got the sort of the lucky losers that have come through, and he's also referring to Mirra Andreeva. So I think there's something that's nice about the fact it does give some of those other players and other storylines a bit more kind of column inches. So people are divided, but it seems like overall we're saying that we're not quite sure about this format just yet.
Yeah, it seems to be quite divided at the moment, but we're going to see how it goes. I wonder if people's interpretations and experience of it will change when it comes to Rome. I feel like it's still quite fresh and quite new, and we'll get an understanding, I think, more than it comes on. But it certainly to me feels different to Indian Wells and Miami, when that feels more natural than kind of these two clay events. And
the popularity of those tournaments is very, very big, and I'm not sure these two quite have the same. And I think that would be something that'll be interesting to see. So if you have been to Madrid, please do get in contact with us and tell us what it was like as a fan. We'd love to get the inside scoop as well, rather than kind of just our sort of opinions here. Yes. And moving on to the action, we're going to talk about the Madrid men's tournament. First of all, we've got 5 of our quarterfinalists set. Alcaraz is through, came through very convincingly today against Zverev. Kachanov with an upset somewhat over Andrei Rublev. Altmaier, the lucky loser, is through against Jaume Munar. And Coric defeated Davidovich Fokina in a really long 3-setter. And then in the bottom half, we had Karatsev come through another all-Russian affair with Daniil Medvedev. To come, we've got Zapata Morales versus Tsitsipas, Struff, Kashin, and I think Fritz and Zhang are on the court at the moment. I mean, Chris, what has intrigued you? What has impressed you so far this week in the men's tournament? Well, I really enjoyed Ruusuvuori Alcaraz. I thought that was really, really interesting from a perspective of, one, seeing Ruusuvuori play that well, and also seeing the way that Alcaraz handled the challenge. The hitting was huge. I was so impressed with the first sort of, at least the first hour and a half of that one. I think that was really, really competitive, and I think the tournament needed that to get going. Kind of based on what we've spoken about previously, I think Alcaraz's serve continues to really impress me. I think the scoreline, when you look at the match with Zverev, I mean, it is it's quite a punchy scoreline. I was having a quick look at this and what was kind of the keys of the match. And what is worrying from a Zverev perspective is that he actually made 78% of first serves. And so I think Alcaraz is kind of known for kind of being great on the return, but Alcaraz was also making 76% of serves and winning 87% of them. So I think from the perspective of those numbers, I mean, it was a dominant display both on serve and on return. And Sasha had 0 break points, and it's actually almost a mirror image of their match they played a year ago, where it was pretty much the exact same story in terms of the serving being really impressive from Carlos and 0 break points face, and that was a 6-3, 6-1 result. But in between that, we did have a French Open upset of the run of form where Zverev did take that in the quarterfinal. So there's still hope for Zverev fans, but it did seem like that match was really laying down a marker, and I think he really has cemented his position as the favourite for Roland Garros.
Yeah, I agree. I think today's victory over Zverev was a real statement win, particularly given, the conditions in Madrid really do favour Zverev. We've seen him play very, very well here before. And yeah, for him Alcaraz to come through. I mean, you spoke about the serve. Do you feel like the serve is the one of the shots that has improved the most since last season? I mean, I feel like going back to last season, a lot of Alcaraz wins were in 3 sets, and that was due to kind of the vulnerabilities, I feel, on his serve. But kind of just seeing particularly those stats, I think, against Zverev, he didn't really give Zverev a look in. And to me, his serve has been so much stronger, and it's one of the reasons why I think he is going to be going in to Roland Garros as one of the favourites, if not the favourite.
I mean, I completely agree. I think it's definitely a case that his serve, it's almost like since he came back, his serve has been more impressive. I think it might be something he's been working on because of the nature of maybe his injury. He's been doing a lot of strength in that area. But no, all the numbers from all of his matches, I mean, he out-aced Alexander Zverev, which is something that you wouldn't think he'd be saying. 5 aces to 3. And it does kind of beg the question kind of from the opposition side of things that the bit of your game you're able to control is your serve, and Zverev's not getting it done, just winning 11% of points on second serve. So I think it's a case that he is kind of developing in all aspects of his game, and I think it shows that in Madrid, as you say, a situation where he has won before, but it has been a lot tougher, he's actually coming through quite easily on a surface that does favour the bigger servers. So very, very impressive. And I do think that it's going to be a tough ask, especially over 5 sets to take him out before kind of picking up what could be a second Grand Slam title.
I mean, another 3-set match that did happen today was Borna Coric versus Davidovich Fokina. Now, I want to talk about Davidovich Fokina because he seems to me he has these special runs, I feel, specifically to Masters events. He had that amazing run in Monte Carlo last year. He's had a great run at Indian Wells, and he had a great run here with a very controversial but really fantastic victory for him over one of your favourites, Holger Rune. This match to me almost had it all. I think one of the matches of the season. It went late, had a dramatic finish, had the Holger Rune interactions, shall I say, with the crowd. What did you make of this match specifically? Because I feel like, first of all, with Fokina, he's such a frustrating player to watch, I think, in some senses, given he's got incredible shot making in him, but he really feels like he lacks the consistency that he can do it across like the whole season, and he's still kind of pigeonholed into almost like a clay event specialist when I feel like he should be doing much, much more. Yeah,
I think that's it's definitely the case where he does tend to produce his standout results on the clay. He's a frustrating player in the sense that he is the maybe man. I think he's one of those where, he's 23. I think we did think that potentially he would have pushed a little bit further forward in the sense of he has been and he has shown a level of tennis that would put him kind of top 10, and we did think maybe he would push on. And he has those results that could have changed his entire career. I think, he's had the match points against Rublev. He had match points against Medvedev the year before in Dubai. He does get himself in these situations, and having just won on a final set tiebreak. He's just lost in a final set tiebreak today. So it's definitely a case where when it comes down to those clutch moments, I do think the top players do know that he's probably not going to make the best decisions when it comes to shot selection.
I totally see that. I mean, he does, I feel, thrive on the energy of the crowd. And I think another player who does that was his opponent, Holger Rune. Now, there was a lot of, as I say, there was a lot of hoo-ha going on during this match. We know the Spanish crowd, we've seen it this week. I think it's actually been a little bit too much at times, particularly in this match. Like, Holger Rune was serving just faults on the first serve, and there was boos and whistles from the crowd. I mean, this all kind of stemmed from a mark, Rune kind of inspecting it. Crowd did not like it. The umpire, Carlos Bernardes, was kind of just talking to Rune about just basically saying stop antagonizing and irritating the crowd, because then, you know, they're going to do what they're going to do. Rune afterwards came out on Instagram stories even, to talk about the match and being like, I appreciate the crowd. You just wish that there was better communication between the umpire and the audience. What do you make of this, in this kind of long line, I feel, of interactions of Holger Rune versus the crowd at a tennis match?
Yeah, I do think I'm getting a little bit tired of some of this now. I think
when he is such a good tennis player.
He's a fantastic tennis player, and I think he talked about the fact that he is almost kind of poles apart his personality on the court and off the court, because off the court, spoke to him multiple times in press, he's super lovely, super nice guy, always takes the time with people, very, very good at answering questions and very patient. And I think he's very fiery on the court, which is fine, but I do think that we do need to kind of stop kind of throwing kind of fuel on the fire when it comes to this. I think he did nothing wrong really in this incident. I think maybe his reaction to the crowd after he rubbed out the mark, but the point is, when it's electronic line calls, the mark doesn't matter. So I think that is the crux of the issue with this one. But I also think when you play against someone in their home country, you're gonna have the crowd aren't going to be with you. No. It's going to be an interesting one, and so I think partly, I mean, use that and thrive from it, rather than have to end up being on Instagram stories saying you hold nothing against the Spanish people, because why would you? Of course they want their man to go through. So it feels like a little bit too much was made about just a pretty standard situation where everyone's rooting for your opponent, and that's how it's going to be. So if you give any sort of reason for them to really get on your goat, then they will. So, and that's what happened.
He is box office, I feel. As I said, you're always going to have...
He loves it.
Yeah,
he does.
I think he wants to throw fuel on the fire, personally. And I think this time, he probably, to me, he threw too much fuel on, particularly with an audience like that. But I think there are going to be other kind of more sedate audiences, like when it comes to British events in the grass, that I think is really going to kind of liven up the crowd, actually. And his shot making on the court, it speaks for itself. And I still think there's a little worry in terms of he's had a lot of close matches that he's just ended in defeat on, and it's, again, this was another kind of situation. I mean, another match that went to a final set tiebreak was Dominic Thiem versus Stefanos Tsitsipas. Now, I want to raise this one, Chris, because I know Dominic Thiem lost this, but I felt like he had the best match that he has had since this long-standing injury kind of comeback. It was impressive to me how close Dominic Thiem got to defeating Stefanos Tsitsipas on a clay court.
Yes, it's obviously a result you can take encouragement from. I mean, he is still 6'11" for the year.
Here we go.
To be the bearer of bad news there, I think. I mean, we've seen this so many times when top players are playing against players who are ranked below them. It's when people bring out their best tennis, when there's no pressure on Thiem. The positive is that he hasn't really tested a top player in the same way that he has like a top player. I'm talking top 5, and like a former sort of top 3 player. I think it is a really good result. I think it will show to him that he can still play the tennis that he needs to. But I would probably argue that kind of what was more impressive was that when Stefanos was behind, he made 39 successive first serves from 5-2 down in the first set, which was unreal. And so I think that is something where it just shows like a bit of a champion's response to being in a situation where you are down. But encouraging signs for Thiem. but I would very much like him to build on this, and we've seen him not build on positive results since he has come back. So fingers crossed, team is back, but I do have to say I can't get too excited just yet.
Fingers crossed indeed. I will say I watched the final set tiebreak. There's a part of me that does wonder if he is at this point whether he wants it so badly that it lends itself to forced errors, particularly from his forehand in that match. They were going long and it just felt like he was putting too much into it because he was like, I'm so desperate to get over the line.
The temperament that he sometimes loses and he forces over pushes. I do think that is definitely something that you do see from him a little bit more. I think even in practice, I've seen some clips where he's getting a bit frustrated with the fact that his level just isn't quite there, or he's missing shots that he wouldn't normally. But, you know, when you play in these sort of close matches, it's when you kind of get that experience again, you get that taste for the competition, and when you're competing at your highest level. I mean, when was the last time you played this well and against such a great player? So it's also a good match for Tsitsipas to win. You know, he hasn't had the best results coming out of Australia, so I think it's pretty important for both of them to put in a good performance. And for Tsitsipas, I think he needs to get a good result at a Masters. I
agree. And I mean, looking at the women's side, the top players there, I think, have generally had a smoother, I think, route passage through the draw. There's still some surprise names making the quarterfinals. We already have one of our semi-finalists, Serena Sabalenka, won today against Maya Sharif in 3 sets, which we're going to get onto in a sec. But we've also got, in that bottom half, Sakkari versus Begu of Romania. Now, that is interesting because I think Begu is now going above Simona Halep as the Romanian women's number one, which has not changed in a very, very long time. We've got Pegula as well against Kudermetova, and at the top, Iga Swiatek versus Petra Martic. Now, we're going to start, Chris, with what happened today. Sabalenka Sharif, because Sharif, I feel like you've got a bone to pick with Sharif because she's not necessarily a WTA Tour specialist, is it? Which makes this result and this run all the more surprising, I feel.
I may have thrown in a comment or two about the fact that she is definitely the queen of the 125s and the ITF circuit. I maybe have done that, especially in the second week of a slam. She is partial to picking up a title or reaching a final. She's obviously won a singles title in the WTA Tour before, but she is, again, it is a surprising result. It's a great result for her. The conditions in Madrid are a little bit different. I think we do know that does lend itself to the upset, and some players really don't find it favourable for them. A bit of a Guadalajara in that sort of respect, where the ball does definitely fly differently. But I mean,
she was on a losing streak though. I think she had lost her last 4 matches in a row.
7-10 for the year. Yeah, she really hasn't had any form this year.
And then she goes and beats Caroline Garcia, Kalinina.
Some really good results. And the thing that is a bit concerning from that sort of whole kind of run that she's had is for Caroline Garcia, who actually beat her early this year. I think that match was in Monterrey. It was love and 4. And then she went down to her in straight sets in Madrid. And I think that's something that is quite shocking because...
Are you worried for Caroline Garcia? I mean, we're obviously heading to the French Open, her home Grand Slam. I thought she played fantastic when we saw her live in Coventry. Granted, against players not necessarily at WTA Tour level. Are there some warning signs there for you?
I think that she hasn't had the year that you'd expect coming off sort of the result at the WTA finals. I do think that does make sense. A lot of players do find it difficult to back up the results. But I do think that the nature of the way that she plays is if she has to believe in her shots. And what she said on kind of Twitter, what was reported on Twitter is what she said was that since the beginning of the year, she kind of gets angry and frustrated too quickly. And after that, it's kind of even worse. She feels that she gives too much kind of away in that sense. It's like it's on her. It's just to get back to work. And it's very much the mental side of things because we know that she can play unbelievable tennis. And in moments of clutch moments like what we saw at the Billie Jean King Cup, she really did. So I think that's something where she's got a great serve, but she will be very much in trouble if she does start missing some of those shots and starts questioning or getting down on herself. So seems like she's very self-aware, and I do think that this will definitely be a blip, but hopefully she'll be very much in contention towards some of the slams towards the end of the year.
Yeah, I think all Garcia fans were hoping it's a blip. I mean, one breakout story, I mean, we're talking about players given the 2-week format, and we're seeing new stories, new players come into our attention. 16-year-old Mirra Andreeva has had a fantastic few weeks, I feel, in Madrid. She did lose to Sabalenka in, what was that? I think in the third round, but she had the fourth round. Sorry, but I mean, she's been playing some fantastic tennis. Had a very good win against Magda Linette in straight sets. Defeated Leylah Fernandez in the first round as well. I mean, she has become the third youngest player to win a main draw match at a WTA 1000 tournament. What do you make of a player kind of breaking on to the tour so early? I think we've had a few of these instances. I'm already thinking about kind of like Linda Fruhvirtova, particularly because of the two sisters, Linda and Brenda Fruhvirtova. Andreeva also has a sister, Erica. I mean, what did you make of Andreeva's performances this week in Madrid?
Well, I think it's the perfect example of, a player that's been given a wild card and has made the most of it. I think it's very hard to know where your level is when you don't necessarily play on the tour in these big tournaments. And you're 15. She had her birthday during the tournament. So I think it's hugely impressive. And I think for me, the thing that stands out more than anything is the nature of the players that she's beaten are not players that give you a win. They make you earn it. And I think Fernandez is someone who fights for every single point and will not want to lose to someone younger than her. That is for sure. Haddad Maia is a competitor of the absolute sort of fiercest qualities when it comes to competing for every point. And then Linette, I mean, she's been grinding out some incredible wins when she has been playing her best tennis. I think the result against Azarenka early in the year was kind of testament to that. So kind of not losing a set against those three players, I mean, I would definitely have bet against it. But coming into this tournament, she was played qualifiers for two ITF tournaments, and so she's on a winning streak coming in. I mean, she'd won 7 matches in one ITF going through qualifying, beating former French Open semi-finalists semi-finalists, I want to say Podoroska, and then also coming through the next week against Fiona Ferrer in the final of another ITF event. So she had the form coming in. It's just great to see that when it came to the bigger tournament, she was able to step up, because it's a great story for the tournament.
I was watching some of the match against Sabalenka, and although it was a straight sets to V, I felt like she walked on with a little bit of a swagger. There was a little bit of confidence. She felt like she belonged, and I don't think she was kind of fazed really by someone like a Sabalenka, who obviously is a very intimidating player, across from the net. So that was what I think impressed me, particularly in the first set. I know it sort of kind of fell away from her, but it's impressive to see the breakout story happen. We'll have to wait and see where it goes next, and whether, if I'm a tournament organizer, I'd love to give her a wild card to see what she can do. But I like that also
Rome. I'd love to see her in Rome,
and I love the fact that she's also an Andy Murray fan. She's got some good role models.
She called him beautiful when she saw him in the lunch hall.
It felt more of a crush necessarily than a role model.
Yeah, I mean, she's lucky that she saw him, given how quickly he exited the tournament. So maybe she'll have to get more of a glimpse in Rome if he chooses to play there.
I mean, we spoke about the fact that Andreeva defeated Leylah Fernandez in the first round. Of course, US Open finalist, lost to Emma Raducanu. Now, Raducanu withdrew from Madrid. She did not play a match. But Chris, we've got to talk about the interview that happened, I think, on Media Day. 16 questions, 58 words. It was a very bizarre, tense press conference. She was not giving a lot away. The mediator had to kind of step in and kind of cull it very, very short, I think after just kind of 3 minutes. What do you make of this, given the fact that she pulled out, the fact that we saw her response in press? What did you make of it?
I'm very glad we're talking about this, because I do think that people do need to think about this from much more of a balanced perspective. I think Twitter's like, oh, Raducanu really stuck it to the British media. And then the other side of it is that kind of the media saying that she's kind of not being respectful, or saying that she's obviously very tense and she's no longer sort of easy breezy and carefree. And I think the reality of it is that she probably played Stuttgart knowing that she wasn't fully fit. And in that match, I think it was quite clear that she probably wasn't playing her best tennis. I think we did speak about that on the podcast. And obviously Ostapenko played brilliantly and she didn't want to talk too much about her wrist. And then that was probably sponsorship related, her participation. And then she's hoping to play in Madrid and put some good form together. And she probably knew before the press conference it was highly likely she wouldn't be playing. So rather than mislead the press, I honestly believe that she was just trying to limit what she said, so that then it wouldn't be that people printed a story that was completely, untrue or completely the opposite. Because if she had have said, well, I'm not sure if I'm going to be playing, well, that would have gone down even worse. So I think the bits that I saw shared, and the fact that it was 16 questions and 58 words and they're kind of going for her. I mean, they did say, how's it going? And she said, good, how are you? She talked about her physical state. And then they asked her about Jodie Burrage. And I think some of the media reporters have said, oh, we asked her about a friend. We thought she'd give us some more of an answer. But we all know they're asking because Emma Raducanu might not be the British number one come Monday. So I do think there's always an edge when it comes to these press conferences. They're all looking for a negative story about Emma. Bear in mind, she is obviously a 20-year-old who's had great success, who isn't doing as well as she was before. And she hasn't, and people are they're looking to write a story that isn't particularly favourable. So she's not looking to do anything beyond answer the questions that she's been asked in a simple way that doesn't mislead. And I think people need to cut her a break, really, because it's obvious there were other things that were at work. And I think we all realised that the next day when she pulled out of Madrid that everything is not right with her wrist.
Yeah, it's hard not to feel, I think, a little bit sad, I feel, for Raducanu at the moment. And I wonder if not being the British number one will take the edge off things. Because it feels to me at the moment, inevitably, Jodie Burrage is going to become ladies number one. I think she is got Greet Minnen in her next match, and if she wins that, I think she then overtakes Raducanu. So yeah, but it's not great to hear. I think Raducanu, particularly in terms of her wrists and what to do with that, those are not quick, I feel, fixes to solve. And you've got the British grass court season coming up. We all know her kind of sponsorship deals. Before we move on, is there a feeling of cut losses now on the clay season and try and get ready for the grass, or do you think she should try and persevere through?
I think it's something where clearly the injury can't be managed. It is something that is recurring. It is something that does flare up. And I think because of that, I think it has to be a different way of looking at how you manage that. And life on tour might not be the best way to manage it. You might have to take a period of time off in order to kind of rehab the injury properly. Obviously, she had wrist issues throughout sort of the US swing we just had and the Sunshine Double, but she played some fantastic tennis. So, I mean, she really can't catch a break, and I'm not worried about her in terms of what will happen. I think she's a fantastic player. I think she's got a very mature head on her shoulders. But I do think that the injury obviously cannot be managed, and it must be very frustrating for her that another season is happening and she's not able to play the tennis that she knows she can play.
And I will say as well, like it's not like this is an isolated incident of a player bursting onto the scenes at a young age and then finding, having this sort of transition period, because another player who I feel broke onto the scene at a young age, Coco Gauff, she's going through her trials and tribulations at the moment. Big microscope, I feel, particularly on her forehand. I mean, Chris, she lost to Paula Badosa 6-3, 6-love. Badosa, look, is a fantastic player. Has been playing great ball at the moment, but these results for Coco Gauff, it feels like her season, or this point in her career, I think naturally we all felt she was just going to be on this infinitely constant upward trajectory. It feels like it's stalling at the moment.
Yeah, it does. I think it's a case where there's definitely technical issues. And I think if you don't have the belief in your shot, then you're going to miss more of your shot, or you're not going to hit it as hard as you should. It's going to fall short, and players are going to take advantage of it. And I think the fact that Goff is doing so well in the doubles court and not necessarily doing as well on the singles court shows that she does need that kind of extra bit of confidence from a partner like Jessie Pegula at the moment. So I think it is sad when you see someone like Goff lose a 6-love set. I think she's had a great clay season last year. She's got a great serve when it's on. Second serve can be a little bit off at times.
Do you think the doubles is a distraction?
I think it's not necessarily a distraction, but I do think that it will start to make things a little bit more concerning for her. The fact that she can play so well in doubles, but not play as well on the singles court when she is obviously out there kind of by herself. I think hopefully, that she's still got some time to play herself into the clay court season. But I mean, it's not like, for example, that Paula Badosa has been playing 10 out of 10 tennis recently. I think she's obviously a player who has been as high as number 2. She did have a really tough match in her first round. So I don't think any of us were expecting that scoreline. Obviously, she's now gone out to Sakari, 6-4, 6-4 in a relatively competitive straight sets loss. So I do think that it's probably cause for concern for Goff, but I mean, it's not like she's not getting time on the court, and it's not like she can't kind of pull it together, but she'll be hoping to definitely reverse this result in Rome.
And just a quick word on Maria Sakkari before we go to an ad break, because I feel like we speak about her and her semi-final hoodoo. I watched some of that match against Badosa. Now, I know you've just said Badosa's not been playing 10 out of 10 tennis recently. I certainly think she's been playing 8.5 out of 10 tennis, and that was an impressive win for me.
8.25.
Yeah, exactly. I thought that was an impressive win for Sakkari. Could Madrid maybe be the tournament where it comes together for her? Because for me, that win against Badosa signified to me it's purely mental what is going on in her head, because when she steps out on the court and is able to play the tennis that we know that she can play at that level, she is a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah, it's a bit of a recurring theme at the moment. We've seen Garcia getting a bit down on herself too early, she said. Sakari has a habit of doing that, too frequently turning to her box. And at the moment, she's in a tie break in the first set against Begu, and that is she's had 8 break points, taking 3, and Begu's taken 3 of 3. So that's the perfect example of a Maria Sakkari match, I think, in terms of a really battling encounter where maybe she doesn't take that first break point that she has. But, she's had good results in Madrid before. But there are some players who are going to be really tough to beat, like Iga, Sabalenka. Pegula is playing well. I think it will be a tough ask right now.
All signs maybe point to another Sakkari semi-final loss. We'll have to wait and see. I mean, Begu has been playing very, very well this week, so still quite a tough customer to get through in the quarterfinals. We're going to be taking a quick break now, but join us in the second half where we will be discussing Simona Halep and the delay surrounding her doping case, the announcement that electronic line calling will be fully adopted by the ATP Tour from 2025, and we're going to look ahead as well to the quarterfinals and beyond at the Madrid Open. So do not go anywhere. Welcome back to the Tennis Weekly podcast, sponsored by DownloadTennis.com. And now we're going to move on to, Chris, I think we're going to move on to a mysterious player. Kim is away this week, so we're gonna change things up, aren't we, with a little bit of an MP.
Well, I think it's about time, since we've brought back mysterious player, that Joel gets put on the spot and put to the test.
The crowd, the listeners, they have been emailing us, tens and thousands of them, bring back mysterious player.
Yes, they have. Tens of thousands of emails.
Flooding our inbox.
And I read every single one. So, the nature of mysterious player, for those who are not familiar, is that I will reveal a number of clues. And then after each clue is revealed, Joel will be guessing which player I am talking about. Previous iterations of this, we've had Johanna Konta, we've had Tommy Haas, and now Joel is ready to take on our third edition. How are you feeling, Joel?
Well, I feel like it can't go any worse than Path of the Courts did last week. And I'm almost kind of glad that I'm not facing... It's not a face-off between me and Kim, because I feel like my confidence is low and I'd still be losing that.
So you're playing against yourself, you're playing for your pride. And I have to say, listeners do play along to this one. So they will tell you if they got it before you. So I'd say maybe that's a fate worse than losing to one of us at Path of the Courts.
The pressure is still there.
Without further ado, we will kick off, and we'll kick off in familiar fashion with a date of birth. I was born on the 4th of January in 1986.
1986.
Bit of mental arithmetic there, Joel, to figure out.
06, 16, 26, so 40, so they're like 36. So they could still be playing maybe towards the end of their career. Probably a very experienced player. I know this is wrong. Martina Trevisan.
Martina Trevisan is very much not 37.
I know.
But we love a generous guess. The second clue, if you're ready, is that her career high is number 23 for singles and number 1 for doubles.
Number 1 doubles player. I'm going to say, I don't know, is it Elise Cornet?
That is a good guess. She's not been number 1 in doubles. She has been as high as top 10 for singles, I believe.
Okay.
So not quite. Mm-hmm. And she's also not 37, just to flag that one. Each clue builds, Joel.
Okay.
Okay. Her career best Grand Slam singles result was the quarterfinals of the Australian Open in 2021.
Having just come back to the tour, is it Sue Shea?
Shea Sue.
Sorry. Yes. Is that right?
Indeed.
Yes.
Joel.
Come on.
How many... that was after just 3. That is
and things were not
impressive.
looking good when I said Martina Trevisan after my first guess, right?
I mean, Kristina Mladenovic, we were even more concerned because I think she would have something to say if you thought she was almost a decade older.
Well, I was thinking it sounded like it could have been Barbora Strykova as well, who's her partner, right?
Yes, they've come back today. That was my 6th clue. I was going to say I'm nicknamed the Wizard was going to come up. And also, I won Wimbledon doubles in 2013, 2019 and 2021.
Who could forget? Yes.
So,
very tricksy player.
One who's made for highlights, I would say. And they're actually into the quarterfinals together of Madrid in their first tournament back, putting together some fantastic results already. So a very topical, mysterious player. And Kim will be thrilled with your performance. I'm sure she'll be very impressed.
That
Joel.
was a confidence boosting win for me. I'm not gonna lie. So yes, right. I enjoyed that. Moving on to the Tennis Weekly mailbag, we had an email from Eleanor this week, and it is to do with electronic line calling. So the question was, with the announcement that the ATP are going to be introducing electronic line calling tour-wide from 2025, does this for you signal the death of the line umpire? Now, Chris, I'm sure you're aware, listeners, perhaps not, the ATP have announced this week that, yes, from 2025, we're not going to be seeing line umpires on any type of tennis court, from what I understand, including clay. What do you make of this, Chris? The fact that, you know, we've grown up, I feel, with line umpires, seeing line umpires on TV. And when it comes to ATP Tour events from a few years' time, they are just not going to be there.
I mean, why is it taking so long is what I would say to this, because if you have the technology, why would you not put it to use? I obviously understand that for some tournaments there's a financial burden that would be too great, but I mean, for some of these big tournaments, why are we still relying on human error when there's some really big sort of things on the line here from a prize money perspective, from a ranking perspective, and I think you don't have to have these sort of issues we've talked about, you know, when it comes to
but do you not love the drama of it? Do you not love the drama of it?
To be honest, I don't really. I think that was too much for the fans and not enough for the players in terms of that, because I think running out of challenges and they've seen a call they know is wrong, no one wants to see someone in that position. And I think it gives people a lot more confidence and in the decision making if it is all electronic. And if it had have been, then we wouldn't have had the incident with Holger Rune this week, because everyone would know that it's electric line calling and that it's not about the mark. So I think it's good that there's going to be a consistency across the tour. But Joel, we did learn it in Coventry at the Billie Jean King Cup that you do have to have backup line judges just in case the technology fails.
So the line umpiring is still going to be there, but they're just going to be backup to robots.
They're going to have a lovely seat.
Robots.
Oh, lovely seat watching the tennis, just not having to, bend over and make loud calls.
Yeah. I don't know. I disagree. I think, to me, unfortunately, this does signal almost, as kind of our listener said, the death of line umpiring. But I'm sad to see it. I think it's become more like a tradition. I think we're going to see it still, I think, at Grand Slams. I just can't imagine Wimbledon getting rid of line umpiring altogether. I think it's going to become something we still see, but not necessarily on the tour. And I'm not going to lie, I enjoy the drama of challenges. It adds a new element. It brings the crowd into it. I get that it's something maybe players don't necessarily want to think about or have on top of playing a tennis match. But I think from the fan engagement perspective, I think it just heightens the drama. And I think we're still going to get controversies regardless with like technology only. We've seen already Jelena Ostapenko doesn't agree with it. We've seen this week with the Fox 10 technology in Madrid. There's been controversies as well. So I don't think that necessarily that's going to go away. So
I do love a challenge though, Joel. That is true. The only thing I'll say, and a good point to leave on, is that when the whole crowd is clapping about whether something's in or out and the suspense of it, that is definitely a good experience. When
it zooms in, I love seeing that.
Oh, we love it. And the but I mean, maybe that we'll save that for exhibitions.
Yeah, well, I think it sounds like it's going to happen on particularly on the ATP side, so we'll have to wait and see. I mean, listeners, let us know. Are you a fan of electronic line calling? Going to be becoming a tour-wide thing in 2025. I think it's going to be, again, a polarizing issue. Chris, moving on, we need to talk about Simona Halep because she has come out this week in relation to her doping case. She has been off the tour for a while now. She's been suspended due to the presence of a banned blood booster, roxadustat, in her system. She is getting frustrated, I think, to the point that it's now come out on social media. She said, "This is the hardest battle I've ever faced." And the fact that she's having to, sit off the court for 8 months, she probably didn't think it was going to be taking this long. Where do you stand on this? Do you have sympathy for Simona Halep, or are you kind of taking a more hard-nosed stance to the situation?
I think the fact that there is this sort of sit-down interview, which is, I think, clearly designed to try and put pressure on some of the anti-doping sort of authorities to try and fast track this. I think that is something that I don't particularly like, because I'm not sure this does happen or would happen in the case of someone who didn't have a media profile. So I'm not such a fan of it. The nature of what we spoke about is that there has not been an explanation as to why that was found in her system. And also, the nature of the way that the system works is that it would be a 2-year ban, even because intent does not play a role in this. So it could be a 2-year ban, or it could be a 4-year ban. So I think it's the slightly impatient sort of response, and nothing's going to change overnight in this case. And the hearing is getting bit pushed back, but I don't think this is a great conspiracy theory. And I think you have to be prepared for it to take as long as it takes, unfortunately, because of the fact that they are following protocol, and there hasn't been a reason given that would validate as to why that was in her system in a way that we have seen, with Robert Fire, where he was able to come back to the tour very quickly whilst he was doubles number one because of a contaminated piece of meat. So I think it's not like there's been a simple explanation, and therefore, until there is an explanation, it's just saying this is the hardest fight. This is a matter of right versus wrong. I would never do this. And I think just because you've handed over the evidence doesn't mean that you are innocent. And I think that that's something which I think people need to be a bit aware of when it comes to this, that this is not black and white.
Yeah, I think for me it's a tough one, and I can understand the frustrations from her side, and I think that it's annoying because she wants to get back onto the tennis court, and that's her trade. And I think we've seen situations where she's obviously not getting any younger, and she's feeling the pressure of this is taking forever, and this is almost kind of robbing the twilight years of my career to potentially have a crack at another Grand Slam. And I totally understand that, and I would love to just can't we just kind of get a move on? But I understand that there's lots of different parties involved, and as a result these things take time and they need to be done in the proper way. So we're just going to have to unfortunately sit tight, and I don't think necessarily going on social media maybe was the right way to go about this, but it sounds like she felt she had no option. This to me is almost kind of like the nuclear option. She's been model kind of athlete so far in terms of staying silent, but she's just felt like she can stay silent no more. And just before we finish this episode, we've got the Wimbledon spring announcement, Chris, very quickly. All the updates basically before the championships come into town later this year. Now, the most interesting things were around the fact that there's going to be more support for the Ukrainian players and also the Ukrainian war effort. So we're going to have the All England Club and the LTA. They're going to be funding accommodation costs of 2 rooms for all main draw and qualifying players across the entirety of the grass court season. They're also going to be offered opportunities to practice at the All England Club's courts and at Surbiton as well. So, yeah, there's going to be more support for you Ukrainians. And I feel like they had to show this given the kind of almost appeasement that Russians and Belarusians will be allowed back into the tour. Do you have any views? I feel like it all sort of makes sense. There's nothing truly groundbreaking, I think, coming out. But I think it's nice to see that they're going to be showing even more support than they have done.
Yeah, I think that's obviously well received, especially kind of making sure that these players who are obviously having a very difficult time at the moment are also kind of being able to be supported and have people there who support them without it being at an additional cost to them. I think it's a positive thing. I think the gentleman's doubles format, I think, is probably at a point where it's a shame to see that drop, but I do think the nature of the game, I think that people probably would prefer to see that, and I think that will be well received in that sense. But no, I think it's very much a case that it's a lot of it's expected, pleasant news on the front of the Ukrainian support, and I look forward to seeing some really interesting third sets and some doubles.
Exactly. We'll have to wait and see. But we've got the rest of Madrid obviously to come. I've already seen Maria Sakkari, after I've been singing her praises, is down a set now to Begu of Romania. We've got Zapata, Morales and Tsitsipas still to come. And then tomorrow we've got Pegula Kudermetova, Alcaraz Kachanov, Swiatek Martic and Altmaier Coric in the quarterfinals. I mean, what are you looking out for in those matches? Any of the interesting matchups?
Yeah, I mean, there are some pretty interesting ones.
Is it Altmaier versus Coric?
I mean, I think I can't see Coric coming through that. I honestly think his worst nightmare might be a lucky loser. I think he does prefer sort of like the upset situation. But no, I'm very pleased to see Petra Martic into the quarterfinals. I think she's a great player. And I think she's someone who plays a great game on clay. So I think that hopefully that will be an entertaining one against Iga, but I do think that Iga will come through. I'm thinking, looking at the predictions, that maybe I've not done too bad a job though, Joel. I
mean, you've certainly done better than me, because I was thinking Rune with a victory, which has obviously not happened.
He was very tired. You did write that in brackets there, Joel. I'll give it to you, though. He is knackered, is what you wrote. So I
also had Badosa and Garcia in my second semi-final for the women, so that's not looking too good. But it's...
I don't want to brag, though, Joel, because technically all of my predictions for the women's could still come true with an Iga, Pegula, Sabalenka, Sakkari.
expecting a Swiatek Sabalenka showdown again, like we had in Stuttgart in the final?
I am indeed. I'm also expecting Tsitsipas to make it through. I did have Fritz. He's just gone out. I think a few of us had Fritz, but this Madrid Open, I've got to be completely honest. I think
you just want it over and done with.
I'm looking forward to Rome. I'm looking forward to the second week of Rome, maybe, but I think it's not quite had the fireworks that I was hoping for, and I think the lack of big names, I think, is the issue for me here.
Can't help the feeling that they've lost the presence of players like Djokovic and Nadal. I mean, understandably so. So, yeah, we'll have to see. Yeah, I'm sure there's going to be more drama to come. But listeners, I hope you've enjoyed our latest episode of the Tennis Weekly podcast. Remember to subscribe to us to stay up to date on all the action to come from the ATP and WTA tours. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all major podcasting platforms out there. And if you like what you're hearing, then make sure to leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify.
You can also follow us on social media or email the show. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Tennis Weekly Pod. You can email the show at tennisweeklypod@gmail.com or check out our website, tennisweekly.co.uk.
And we will be back next Monday at Tennis Weekly HQ for another tour catch-up, looking back on the finals of the Madrid Open. So I hope you can join us for that. But in the meantime, it's goodbye from Chris.
Goodbye.
And it's goodbye from me. We'll see you again soon.